Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Smee, you're watching Punk Rant. Today I want to talk about something that is hugely important, particularly if you are an independent author and you've gone through the whole process of doing your own work to put it out there. One of the things you can't really get away from is the idea of a critique. You need people to read your work and to give some honest feedback. Now there are various ways to do that, and as an indie author you usually pay for those, which I did. I paid a couple of resources like Reader's Views. There was an Indies Today I also paid for, and I got some really great feedback and good honest reviews from people who are looking more objectively at your work. I want to address something else though, because there's also this culture on YouTube about ranting about people's books. Sometimes that can be discouraging, particularly if you're an independent author and you want some honest perspective on the book. But there is a huge difference between critiquing and criticizing books, which is what I want to talk about today on Punk Rant. Stick around and we'll look at what are those major differences and why it can be damaging to you as a person, but also kind of just a lot of hot air on YouTube. Don't go anywhere. The other day I stumbled upon a website called The Talks, which is really fascinating. It's just straight up interviews with celebrities, interesting people, and they give you just a direct transcript of the questions and the answers. Quite entertaining. And I happened to stumble upon Mila Kunis. She's been in the news a lot because she's Ukrainian, of course, with what's going on over there in Europe. And she talks a little bit about her experience as the rise and fall in Hollywood. One of the comments that she makes, which really stuck with me, is that there is kind of a sick culture, I think she refers to it as, of wanting to destroy people because it seems to get more views or more interest. And for whatever reason, we as human beings like to see others knocked down. We like to see other people pushed off their pedestal, even if they're doing well, even if they're valid in what they're doing, just because, I don't know, maybe it's your own inadequacies as human beings. It's an easier way to feel better about yourself. Regardless, whatever the reason may be, I get a little bit discouraged when I watch YouTube channels that seem to just smash other people's work, and particularly for independent authors. There is a lot of independent work out there, and none of it is perfect. You know, I have my own opinion about why that doesn't matter. I think it's awesome that people are willing to take the step and publish a book, even if you feel like, you know, you're not where you want to be as an author. It's a process. We're all in this process, and as long as you keep your eye on the goal of getting better, I think that's the positive aspect of self-publishing. That's my point of view. I don't feel different even after putting out my book. But I did make some push to be able to get some reviews because I want to get the book out there. I want people to talk about it. And I sent off my book to a YouTuber, just a small-time YouTuber. I think at this point the person had about 350 followers, which is about where I am with my channel. And I think it's great. It's nice, comparable. We can support each other. You can read and give some critique. I was really disappointed, not because of what was said, but how it was said. And so the first thing I want to talk about is, how do you actually critique a book? How do you objectively approach the work in itself? I think one of the things that is a red flag that you have to be cautious of when you watch people's channels, and you can watch for whatever reason, of course, but simply tearing it down might be a way to get some views, but it doesn't really do anything. I think Einstein said once, it's easy to tear things down, it's hard to build them, or something to the effect. It's important to understand what is the difference between a critique and a criticism. A criticism is simply subjective. It is your personal bias, it is your understanding of either the genres that you like as you perceive them in the world. And there's nothing wrong with this per se. We're all, you know, allowed to like or dislike what we want. And we can opine and we can give perspectives. For all we want, we can say what we like and don't like. I think it's just important to understand and differentiate between that criticism, which is not necessarily justified by the objectivity of what goes into the craft or the literary craft itself. And I think this is where the slam culture, particularly for indie books, comes from, because people feel entitled to put their word out there. Unless you study this to a great extent, a lot of people don't really know how to critique books correctly. So let's start with this today. The critique is very much literary. Now when we talk about literature, we're not just talking about the words on the paper, because the words on the paper is the beginning point, but there's also this kind of veil that you have to remove and sift through and look through the mirage to understand deeper meaning of writing and literature. It's quite possible that the piece you're reading does not provide any of that, and if it's so flat and light, it's probably not a great piece of writing. However, I would also say that most people are pretty well versed enough to understand that this is just not ready to go out and I should not put it out. I have a hard time believing that most indie books that are put out have not gone through various steps of process to be able to get it to that point. Books and literature are based on ideas, so there are always some ideas that need some critiquing within the work itself. And when I talk about ideas, you really have to invest yourself in the manuscript to be able to make a critique. It's very difficult to make an active critique on 40 or 50 pages. If you're at that point, there are two possibilities. One, it's horrendous, but usually that happens with beta reading or early readings. It's not with final published works. The other half is that you're just not engaged personally with the work, and that happens, and that's totally fine. I've stopped a lot of books, within 100 pages because it's just hard for me to get into the book. But there's a point, if you are, a quality critiquer, to draw the limits between this is something that I personally don't find a fit with, and this is actually the problems with the text. Good critiques are going to look specifically at the technique and style. Technique is going to involve grammar, it's going to involve how you put your stories together, and I've done videos on this, and there's a myriad of different things that you can and should talk about specifically if you're going to give a critique. If you're not talking about those aspects, then you're just missing the point in espousing personal likes and dislikes. Style is something that is a little bit more amorphic and a little bit more ambiguous because some styles don't fit what I like. I'm going to give you a specific example. When I read Mitchum's Cloud Atlas, that is a very difficult book. It is heavy vocabulary, stylistically it's hard to get into, the phraseology is difficult. I would never say that's a bad book. Ulysses is another one. Wow, man, that is some work. Infinite Jest, I'm working through. There are other things that I've learned to get engaged with that book. I'll do a video on that later. But Infinite Jest is something that is really for an attuned reader who must pay attention to the reading. It may not fit your style. That's fine, accept it, move on. So when we have certain expectations for books, those expectations are very personal, and they are finding their sources within you as the individual. When we look at critiquing, we can look at working and not working. What are the elements of the book that are functioning well? What are the ones that are hindering either readability or flow? And those are worth making comments on. Particularly, this is a message to YouTubers who are feeling like you want to critique independent books, which I think should happen, by the way. I like that other people read and engage, and it helps to spread the word in a difficult sea of independent published books. But I want you to think about the coolness of independent publishing. One of the luxuries that we have is that honestly you can do whatever you want. There is no peg for the genre, or there's no peg for the style. You're able to create as you see fit and publish when you feel like this is the message that I want to send. This is the artwork. This is, Andy Warhol putting it out there on the wall and people saying, what the hell is this stuff? It looks weird until it gets going. And then people are like, actually, this might be kind of interesting and good. Independent publishing does not have any constraints put on by agents or publishers. You can mix genres, you can mix ideas, you can mix techniques, and all of that makes it valid for your personal author expression. Engage that, and particularly if you're going to critique that, take a step back and say, is this something that's actually kind of interesting? Is this something that I would not have read normally? And you might be surprised. So YouTube, I beg you, stay positive, even though you might get a few more views from slamming somebody else's work. We're all working hard. It's a personal investment. And be kind, be good, be helpful. Until then, you just keep writing. Punk write.